So last week, I mentioned that technology companies like Apple, Microsoft, and Valve are having to raise their prices on hardware because of a major problem going on right now in the technology hardware supply chain for computer chips, particularly those used for memory. Many other companies have also announced they're raising prices on consumer hardware. Nintendo, Sony, Nvidia, and Samsung are just some of the many companies that have announced higher prices on electronics. And the three major chip makers, Samsung again, along with Micron and SK Hynix, are currently being sued for a price-fixing scheme to decrease inventory and drive up the costs of dynamic random access memory, or DRAM, so that they can make a fortune selling what's left in a constrained market where AI companies have entered as a major buyer, scooping 70% of what's available up along with consumer electronics, automotive, and appliance manufacturers, all of whom are also reliant on these chips, fighting for the other 30%. By the way, these three companies make 91% of the DRAM in the world, and two of the three have already been found guilty in the past of a similar price-fixing scheme that sent some of their executives to jail. And Micron has already announced it's leaving the consumer market entirely. So this is all objectively bad news because it's going to make everything that uses a computer chip objectively more expensive for consumers. Even older DRAM standards are selling for absurd premiums because of supply issues. I recently had to buy a laptop for a family member, and I was shocked to find that unless you're willing to spend into the thousands of dollars to get a decent setup, you're either going to have to compromise on the amount of RAM you get or the amount of hard drive space you get. And both of those are absolutely crucial to have plenty of when you're forced to run Windows 11 because Microsoft is no longer supporting older versions of its operating system. In the meantime, costs are going up in many other industries as well. Food prices have skyrocketed because a number of shocks have happened to the supply chain, and the beef industry is particularly impacted. Rising fuel costs have made travel, shipping, and transportation far more expensive, and the costs are generally being passed on to consumers since they're being viewed as long-term increases that aren't going to disappear anytime soon. Service industries are also struggling with labor as a sizable portion of the population in the Western world heads into retirement while the millennials enter middle age and birth rates are declining, providing fewer entry-level replacements for basic jobs. And while immigrants were once a reliable source of lower-cost labor in service industries, anti-immigration policies have led to many service industries struggling to find staff willing to accept low wages and benefits for jobs. While I actually think it's a good thing that the economy is shifting to give workers more power, the result is that the rising costs once again get passed on to the consumer because the companies paying those workers more tend to want to protect their profits. All of this looks and sounds an awful lot like we're heading into another recession or even a depression. And that makes it sound like it ought to be terrible news for marketers too. And for those who refuse to change and evolve with the times, you know what? It definitely will be. But you know the old saying about how the word crisis can also represent opportunity? It's definitely there. And today we're going to explore how marketers can survive in a world where everything costs too much. I'm Sean in St. Louis, and this is the Marketing Gateway. So let's first understand how the consumer economy works in 2026, because I don't think we marketers talk about this topic enough. You know, in the old days when people didn't have access to easy credit, the consumer economy was pretty simple. Consumers would have a source of income, usually employment, that would put a certain amount of money in their pocket every month, and they would generally spend it until they ran out of money. Some of their money would go into obligations, some of it would possibly go to savings or retirement or investments, and a little of it would perhaps be given away to charity. But most of it didn't stay with them for very long because they'd use it to purchase things. In the modern era, consumers tend to have more of an instant gratification approach to purchasing because they do have access to credit, and that means that consumers who want something now and who are willing to pay for it later have very few barriers to preventing them from buying what they want. Now, I of course recognize that there are plenty of people who live hand to mouth and for whom credit isn't always available or in large supply. According to the Fed, 6% of American adults are unbanked and 13% use non-bank check cashing or money orders. But The same report says that 81% of American adults use a credit card, 46% carry a balance, and 62% feel confident their credit applications will be approved, while only 33% of those who applied for credit in 2024 reported being denied or offered a lower amount than requested. And those who have a six-figure income are far more likely to pay off their balances immediately, while the likelihood of paying banking or credit card fees is higher among those making a five-figure income, rising the lower you go, of course, and disproportionately impacting young people, people of color, and the differently abled. So credit is definitely something most Americans have at their disposal, and this is a plus for marketers because it allows tools such as digital marketing to be far more effective at driving purchases. You can serve an ad to a person within the target market and use a variety of metrics to capture engagement and purchase rates through digital channels. Those retailers, product companies, and distributors who have omnichannel strategies that link their data together have an even broader view of what their target markets are doing. And the influence of ad buys for products or low involvement services can be inferred far better than ever before because there's so little time between exposure and purchase. We have credit to thank for that. It's removed most of the barriers to purchasing. But in a world in which things are becoming more expensive, consumers do tend to be mindful of using credit less and monitoring their spending more. They may use apps that allow them to budget their spending and which send them alerts when they've deviated from their normal patterns. And they may also reduce the amount of credit cards they have to keep themselves from being tempted to use them. And they might take drastic measures like freezing their cards in a block of ice to ensure that they don't use them rashly. And, before you knock it, I've heard from several people that this technique actually works when you're trying to slow down your spending, assuming that those cards aren't already linked to your preferred online shopping platforms, that is. So over the next 3 to 5 years, as consumer prices are predicted to rise due to the number of factors, marketers can expect to see three things. The first is more value-conscious buying behavior. The markets for lifestyle brands, upgrades, indulgences, and mid-level luxury purchases or services will decline. Deal-seeking behaviors, patronizing discount stores, and rediscovery of cheaper alternatives will rise. One example is restaurants will see fewer diners, but takeout places, particularly lower-cost choices like pizza or fast food value menus, will see an uptick. You might think the market for luxury products would decline, but the reality is those tend to do well or even better during tough times because the people who have disposable income tend to like to spend it. And micro luxuries like conspicuous trendy items, cosmetics, and fast fashion will still also do well because even people with little money to spend still like to feel good about themselves. And that's a phenomenon that's known as the lipstick effect. The second is a lower interest in having the latest and greatest. Now, this is a little different from where we were in 2008 during the last recession because at the time, people were really interested in getting into this whole smartphone thing. And smartphones needed to be upgraded regularly enough that people were willing to spend some money on them. There's really not a latest and greatest right now, though, because the big technology is AI and people aren't buying that. It's getting shoved into everything they own for free. And upgrading technology is becoming cost prohibitive, so we can instead expect to see people more interested in hanging on to their computers, tablets, smartphones, and game consoles, or seeking sale or value-priced items instead of buying the newest flagship products. The third area is a greater interest in distraction. During hard times, people are far more likely to seek out novel and interesting things to avoid having to focus on the harsh realities around them, especially if those things are free. In the 2008 recession, a lot of traditional brands perished, especially in the retail space, but many novel new brands and platforms grew during that time. Some of the biggest success stories from 2008's era included online services like Dropbox, Glassdoor, Groupon, Airbnb, Venmo, Pinterest, Square, WhatsApp, and Uber. There were also food brands like Beyond Meat, Smashburger, and Kona Ice, and service brands like Rent the Runway, ZocDoc, Zulily, Cabbage, and LearnVest. And let's not forget Fitbit, which joined several other personal fitness trackers as a big trend post-recession. But another brand that grew greatly during the last recession was Netflix. Originally a DVD rental by mail service, Netflix launched its streaming video service in 2007 with a bunch of not-so-desirable content, but gradually transitioned away from physical media, launching Netflix Originals in 2009, and even attempting to divest from its rental business entirely in 2011. Netflix inspired several different competing streaming video on-demand platforms like Hulu and Vudu, and Even though those largely required computers or specialized media players to utilize at the time, the appeal of video on demand decoupled from a cable subscription appealed to those seeking value and novelty. Similarly, social networks like Facebook and Twitter and media services like iTunes, YouTube, Pandora, and Spotify all either were founded or saw rapid growth during this time. It wasn't just because they were new and novel. It's because they were welcome, low-cost distractions to the poor economic news people were receiving daily. These platforms grew far more once the recession ended and consumers began more rapidly adopting smartphones, but they emerged from the recession with a base of users already obsessed with them. Okay, so we have these three shifts: value conscious, lower interest in the latest and greatest, and higher interest in distraction. And marketers have to be really savvy about how important these are to consumers during tough times. And a fourth characteristic that's always important, but which can become even more prominent, is relationship building. Because caring for consumers during the hard times makes them tend to feel more attached to brands, products, and services during the good times. So, how do marketers take advantage of these shifts? Well, let's first understand that these four shifts all suggest a general tonal change in how marketers communicate with customers. One thing marketers need to do during times like these is get away from hype, which is a fun distraction, but it's just not very actionable when people don't have any money. Getting people excited about something that then is coming in at a high price doesn't work too well in these times. Instead, marketers have to position their brands, products, and services as being something easy to try or cheap or for free, and which is helpful, valuable, interesting, and relatable. Which means thinking less about features and attributes and more about storytelling, humor, novelty, or social virality to get those points across. Now, as it happens, the timing couldn't be better for this. Marketers who are making use of AI tools in their production are probably really well positioned already to provide that level of engagement, at least for now. I don't want to turn this episode into a discussion on AI because we can save that for another time, but the rapid ability to produce creative content that's fun and interesting and disposable really suits the times that we're heading into. But beyond the rapid pace at which AI tools allow production to proceed, marketers who are creative and fun are going to drive engagement and interest a lot more than those who try to focus on persuading customers to spend. And that leads me to a second point. I've seen a lot of talk recently about brands trying to double down on their current customers, which is actually the opposite of what they should be doing right now, unless they have a strong service relationship with them that makes that move feel natural. The customers who can afford to spend more are a rarer and rarer sight in an economy where consumer prices are rising. What you have to do instead is focus on customer retention and organic growth by caring for customers and meeting their needs and providing them real value. So this is one of the reasons that old brands tend to wither and die during recessions while new ones spring up. And old ones don't want to cut into their profits, but the new ones subsidize their service to try to attract more customers. Mature brands should really focus on delivering value and communicating how they're doing it. Waiting until sales dip is too late. It should be part of your strategy now and for the remainder of the decade. So, for example, if I were running a steakhouse right now, I'd probably be looking for other products to pivot some customers to in order to keep my high beef costs from driving customers away. As I discussed last week, that's been a winning strategy for Longhorn Steakhouse, which is offering Parmesan crusted lamb chops that have been a viral sensation on TikTok. Lamb's cheaper than beef right now and also novel for a lot of people who aren't used to eating it regularly. Offering it as an alternative is a savvy move. If I were running a service business right now and I was worried customers were going to cut back, I would probably conduct some research with them, understand what their pain points are, and then try to offer an add-on service to meet those needs at an affordable price. So, for example, if the service I was offering had to do with pet boarding, and I found out that many of my customers needed help with on-demand dog walkers that could be booked through a simple text messaging system, I might explore offering that new service at as low a cost as possible to retain those customers for my more profitable boarding service. A third point is that marketers need to recognize that as prices increase, consumers are going to respond less to urgent messages and spend more time evaluating purchases, even for goods and services that might have been low involvement decisions in the past. Even very simple staple goods can become the sort consumers will shop around for to find deals or alternatives. And you cannot take for granted that they're going to continue to purchase as readily or as willingly if they feel a need to control their spending. So beyond offering deals and promotions, looking for ways to communicate value is important, particularly if you can't lower prices to compete with low-cost providers. In products, quality is always a differentiator, and customers will pay more for perceived benefits than differentiate a product, like better ingredients or materials, more ethical sourcing, stronger warranties, and so forth. In services, customer service is a big differentiator, and customers will spend more to get better service if they feel like it'll help them to avoid frustration down the road. So look, it's going to be a rough road ahead for consumer pricing, but marketers have the unbelievable advantage of being able to roll with the punches and shift along with the culture. It's happened before and it'll happen again. So adjust your strategy, look out for your customers, and enjoy the ride ahead. If you go in knowing what to expect, you'll be better positioned when prices start to come down again in the years to come. I'm Sean in St. Louis, and this has been the Marketing Gateway. We'll see you next time. So our plug this month is for animal welfare and rescue. And I'm not going to mention any one particular organization as a place that I want you to designate your attention, because there are so many that are in need. And whether you have a local animal shelter or humane society or a place that's doing trap and release or anything along those lines, there's always a need to donate to help support the care and rehabilitation of animals in your area. One group that I do like to donate to is Stray Rescue of St. Louis. They are very well regarded in terms of their reputation. They have a 90% score on Charity Navigator, and they do a great job of getting to know the animals within, especially the urban areas, that have been abused or neglected or just set loose, have gotten loose from careless owners or things like that. And they help these animals to begin to trust humans again and to find forever homes. And I respect and admire their mission so much. But there are many other animal groups out there as well that are looking after and caring for animals that have been discarded. Now, I want to say I'm an animal lover, and there are many cats and dogs and other adoptable pets out there that people get with great intentions. You know, when they're puppies or kittens, they're cute, right? They're fun to have, but they can't care for them properly. And instead of trying to find a good forever home for these pets, they'll go out and they'll drop them off in the woods, or they'll just kind of let them go loose in their neighborhood or things like that. And this almost always is one of the worst things you can do for these animals, because they wind up coming back to where humans are living because they're dependent on humans for food. They get in fights with other pets. They get in fights with wildlife. They get hit by cars. A lot of bad things can happen. And the people that are out there watching for these animals, caring for them, having compassion for them, are people that I respect and admire like you wouldn't believe. So again, I want you to take some time, research your local animal welfare organizations in your area, and be sure to give, because especially during the summer, these animals are threatened like you wouldn't believe by the heat and by just all the additional activity that's going on. And so anything you can do to help will make sure that these animals get another chance at a great life.